Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of Off the Bench, Northern Arizona Prep Sports, presented by Rice Accounting and Jackson Hewitt Tax Services, Cottonwood Parks and Recreation, and Gettles High Desert Mechanical. I'm your host, Philip Catafamo. Joining me today to talk about the 4A Grand Canyon region. To my right, you can hear him with me on Friday nights for the Mingus Marauder football games on KYBC and Verde Valley TV. Nick Yatsenko. Nick, welcome to the show.
It's good to be here, Phil. I love watching the show weekly and getting the updates on all the coaches and sports around the valley.
All right. And to my left, you can hear him on KKLD. He is the voice of the Bradshaw Mountain Bears. It is Matt Showalter. Matt, welcome onto the show.
Hey, great to be here again.
Now, Matt's new to the show. And Matt's not new to the show. He's been on the show. Where have you been? Where are you at?
I'm trying to do exactly what Matt does on Friday nights because Matt does an outstanding job calling the Bradshaw
Yes,
game.
Matt does do a fantastic job. We do have a bit of an update here. Not necessarily new information. It's been known for a while. Mojave High School has moved down from the 4A to the 3A. They will be competing, at least for right now, in the 3A West. They appealed at the end of football season and were approved to move down from 4A to 3A. So, Mojave's looking to get a couple wins in the 3A, and we wish them nothing but the best and a lot of success. So, like I mentioned, Mojave, they're going to be playing some teams that we've seen. River Valley, Mingus played them last year. Lake Havasu's on a couple of schedules. Kingman is playing against Lee Williams this year. So, a couple familiar teams that Mingus has seen, and Bradshaw and a few of our other 4A teams. But like I said, Mojave, congratulations and best of luck. Hopefully they'll be in the 4A again real soon. But here we are, gentlemen. We're getting very, very close to the start of football season. Next week, we'll be calling our respective teams opening night football games. We'll be on the road. I believe Bradshaw will be at home, or will they'll be on the road at Cactus, right?
2 straight weeks on the road, starting with Seton Catholic.
Seton Catholic. Okay, so we're getting close to the start of football season. So I thought we'd start off first and foremost with Lee Williams Volunteers, just because we were talking about Mojave. I thought we'd talk about the school with the closest proximity to them with Lee Williams. Last season, the Volunteers had a 4-3. Pretty good year for Coach O'Boyle and the Volunteers. But they come into this year, they bring back Devon Santos, who is their top quarterback. They lose Cameron Toms. He and Levi Beckham are headed off to go play college football, so congratulations to them. But Matt, I want to start with you. Lee Williams Volunteers, where are we at with them this season?
Well, they're real solid. They returned 7 to their starters on offense, 4 starting linemen. They have one of the top offensive linemen at center, Aaron Caraveo. That's going to make a big difference for them. They do have Devon Santos, as you mentioned, at quarterback. He was first-team All-Region last year. He also is more efficient in his passing. Last year, he might have had just 1 interception all year, whereas prior to that, he had like 15. Certainly, he can run, so they may let him loose a little bit more this year. But the big key for them is, can they find the underclassmen who'll fill in the skill positions? Defensively, they returned 5. They got a real good line. So I really think Patrick O'Boyle, now his 6th year there, 3 as a head coach, he's really got that program going. They're always tough.
Yeah, they are very much tough. And like you mentioned, they're coming back with a strong offensive line. They returned their quarterback. They got a kid named Troy Edwards, who I know Coach O'Boyle. I got a chance to speak with him on the show not too long ago. And he was talking about how the returners coming back, and of course, bringing in Troy Edwards, a sort of jackknife player, a bit of a stronger arm than Devon Santos. They bring a bit different aspects to the offense. One guy a bit more of a runner, another guy a bit more of a passer. So Lee Williams, when we were preparing for this show, and again at the end of the show, we're gonna give our predictions, the top 2 teams and who we think might be a dark horse candidate. But Lee Williams, for me, was right at the top there. One of the teams that could really surprise us this season, I think, with who they've got coming back.
Well, I think the issue for them is always depth, number 1, how many on the roster, and then number 2, team strength. Their head coach, Patrick O'Boyle, said, well, we need to improve on team strength, and they do, because Bradshaw, for example, has leaned on them the last few years and worn them down that second half, but they're very talented.
Yeah, I think they're incredibly talented. Nick, you and I got a chance to see them. You remember Cameron Toms hustling down the sideline to get a tackle? The kid's faster than lightning.
And Santos did it on both sides of the ball, too, against Mingus. That was a scary team, and I'd say their record does not justify their season they had last year. I think there's a lot of weapons, like you said, that are coming back. They might have had a couple guys going to college, but Santos was dangerous in himself against Mingus last year. So, yeah, they'll be pretty good.
In the 4A, just passing-wise, Lee Williams ranked 10. They got a great starting quarterback, like we mentioned, in Santos, and they're coming back strong. So, and it's almost, you kind of look at the region, and the region itself this season, I think, is probably going to be the closest it's been in a little while. And I talked with Coach O'Boyle about that. I genuinely do feel that the region could be decided by just a couple games in between those top 3 or 4 teams. And I really do feel like Lee Williams is going to be one in the middle of the mix there. I mean, of course, Bradshaw's returning a lot, which we'll talk about, but I think Lee Williams could surprise a lot of teams.
If I could throw this in, it is going to be competitive. If it comes down to just a few points, special teams are key. Justin Wright, probably the best kicker in the Grand Canyon region for Lee Williams.
Right. Let's shift gears here. Mingus Union High School. Of course, Nick and I are very familiar with the Marauders. Again, watch along on Verde Valley TV or listen to KYBC every Friday night. We got our broadcast there. We start on the road at Thunderbird, so that's going to be a lot of fun. But the Marauders, starting off the off season, a bit, I don't want to say in dismay because I feel like that's a bit of a depressing tone, but it's not unknown now. Doug Provenzano no longer the head coach over at Mingus Union High School. Doug cited some things that were some challenges for him throughout last season. Going into this season, COVID was one. The commute from Phoenix, because Coach Provenzano lived in Phoenix up here to Cottonwood, not as easy for him. Didn't get a chance to see his family too much. So we do wish Coach Provenzano the best of luck. We thank him for the season he spent with Mingus Union, but they seem to have had an answer at who might be their coach. I'm not sure. We might get more of a coaches by committee. It's going to be an interesting season for the Marauders. Do get some returners back. Zach Harrison obviously coming back for his senior year. They only graduated a handful of seniors last year, which was great. Unfortunately, a couple of those guys were on the offensive line, but they do bring back some great guys. Nick, just because you and I are there every Friday night, how are you feeling about the Marauders going into this season?
Yeah, this is we're still in the middle of rebuilding, and with Harrison going to be a senior this season, I think our chances are looking a lot better. Hopefully, we can be above 500. I think that's going to be pushing it to our limits for Mingus. But after last season, we saw a lot of bright spots. I know we've had some big rebuilding years. And yeah, these are unprecedented times. You go back to Doug Provenzano leaving as head coach. You also not many summer camps going on.
Right.
So you're not sure quite what the numbers are in your summer camps and summer practices. So hopefully we get to see a practice or two before the season starts, and we can get a good gauge on that.
And Matt, you're also a part of a program that transitioned with a different coach last season. Coach Bob Young going from, I think he was at Sedona, was going to be the defensive coordinator at Camp Verde, changed his mind, took the job at Bradshaw Mountain with the unfortunate passing of Coach Mueller. But Nick and I were coming into the season kind of optimistic. We were curious what the Marauders would look like with a full year with Doug Provenzano, and they come into this season potentially without a coach. There might be a coach announced. Nothing's official just yet. But Matt, how are you feeling about the Marauders?
Well, it's be the third head coach basically in 4 years, if you go back to 2017. And as we all know, Mingus has been traditionally a powerhouse. But when you lose a coach who's been somewhere for a long time, and Bradshaw's faced that too, it takes a little while to kind of get going again. And so I believe for Mingus, Zach Harrison's a big key. Anthony Islas, one of their linemen, first team all regions, outstanding. Arnado, really good running back, fullback, and he's really good on defense. So Alvarez certainly is, he's one of the top DBs, special team, one of the best athletes actually in the Grand Canyon region. So if all these players play and contribute, that's a really good core. And if I'm a Mingus fan, I'm like, yeah, that's tough losing a head coach this close to the start of the season. But when you look at them, they finished strong. They almost beat Prescott. And so the question for me is, how will they adjust to a new coaching situation? And more is going to be more having that attitude, going back to the old tough way of Mingus football. Will they be able to do that? So I think if they can maintain the core and some consistency the way they approached the season like they did last year, I really think Mingus could be dangerous. They
do lose a little bit of leadership. Of course, Drew Meyer, the big running back for the Marauders, and there's a couple other running backs that are no longer in the 4A Grand Canyon region, which we will get to. But Drew Meyer was kind of the centerpiece of the offense last year, along with Zach Harrison, along with Zach Figge, who also graduated. I mean, Nick, we're going to be coming into this season with a few more questions regarding the coaching staff, but also, I mean, who's going to be that guy for the Marauders?
Yeah, I mean, how many times did we announce Meyer up the middle for 3 yards?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a brutal 3 yards, and if he can get that 3 yards every time, we never have to punt. We win every game.
Okay.
But you don't get that every 3 yards, and Meyer was a hard-nosed running back to go up the middle. It's really going to be up to the seniors. Kind of to piggyback on what you said there, Matt, with the coaching situation, a lot falls on these seniors. They got to recruit some guys from their class, guys from other sports. They got to get passionate, and they got to get ready for the season because you haven't had that coach, relationship to keep you motivated and stuff. So it really does rely on this group of seniors, and we can see what they can do.
And that's what it's going to be. It's got to be the senior leadership. It's got to be those guys who have been there for the past 4 years. In your Zach Harrisons, in your Anthony Islises, in your Angelo Alvarez's, the guys who were that last group of Bob's freshmen before he left and Coach Ortiz took over, and then Robert Ortiz left. Doug Provenzano came in. These are the guys who have been sticking with the program for the past 4 years, along with the great volunteers and assistant coaches that they've had for a few years now. It's really going to come down to, I think, the mentality of the team is where are the Marauders going to be once that ball is snapped on the first week? Is it going to be like we've talked about, where we're seeing the seniors rally around with the coaches rallying around with the players, where they're going, look, on the surface, it's going to be a tough year, but if we rally together, we can manage 4 or 5 wins. There's some games here that the Marauders can win. I genuinely feel that, but it's going to start with the mentality, and we'll know on the first week, like we mentioned, September 3rd at Thunderbird High School. You can catch that on Verde Valley TV and KYBC. Make sure to give you the plug as well, Matt. but I'm sorry, it's going to be the leadership.
Perkins and Dirkolek, if they hang in there and play, those are 2 really good players for them as well. Defensively, Mingus had a really good performance against Bradshaw Mountain. They just turned the ball over 5 times. Yep. Also, in that first week against Flagstaff last year, on the road, they lose 7-0.
Against River Valley, they were leading at halftime.
Yes. Yep. This team, if they hang together, the problem's going to be the depth. They got worn down in the second half. That'll be the issue for them. For example, like Lee Williams, too. Can they have the numbers on the roster to get them through because the core, a very good football team?
Yeah, and they very much are. And just kind of taking a look at their schedule here, I do apologize for not looking at the schedule for Lee Williams, but we'll touch upon that in just a little bit. But Marauders start on the road against Thunderbird. They're 2-6. Thunderbird was 2-6 last season. Yunker, who is also on a couple other teams' schedule as well. Mingus gets an opportunity there. So a couple of the Freedom games: Arcadia 1-7, Benjamin Franklin 1-4. The region's going to always be tough. That's never going to not be the case. But I think, like you said, Matt, like Nick, we're all kind of in an agreement here. This is a team that can put together a few wins. If they can win their out-of-region games and sneak a win against, let's say, a Lee Williams, or sneak a win against Prescott, or maybe Bradshaw, Flag, or Cocoa, I mean, really anybody, we could be looking at a possible playoff team that, in a lot of ways, was looked at, Nick, you said it, we're still rebuilding. That mentality is already there, is they're going to be rebuilding. But if they put it together this season, they could win a few games and potentially maybe look at a playoff spot, or at the very least go, we got a great community here, we got a great group of kids, and we got something started here.
Hey, and now saw them in 7-on-7 twice this summer. They look good. They beat Bradshaw once, and they competed well in the big man competition. So again, if they can just keep the core together, add a few numbers to the roster, they should be all right. They should be competitive. Yeah,
and we're excited to see. Nick and I, you and I will get an opportunity to go down to practice here very soon to just kind of touch base with some of the guys and talk with the coaches and talk with the apparent new head coach of the Mingus Union Marauders, which we won't announce here. We'll just let the school officially announce it if that happens to be the case. So we'll just talk speculatively, but. Yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting year.
We'll get to see live at that depth chart that Mingus has and these practices coming up, because the season starts just a week away now. And yeah, the depth chart's going to be tough because, like you said, we have a great core. Alvarez, Dirkolek, these guys are great athletes, but they're usually playing both sides of the ball for Mingus. We usually got them. We're expanding them on offense and defense. So to see that depth chart's going to be key. And to go back to our schedule, I'd like to see some wins out of these Phoenix schools. Yonker, we play in Queen Creek, Arcadia, Thunderbird. They may not have had great seasons in the past, but as a morale boost, it's huge for your program, especially a small school up here, because you kind of just view those as Phoenix schools, down in the valley, and which is a lot bigger and better options down there. So it gets you real pumped if you can get a couple wins out of that Phoenix group schedule.
It'll definitely be an interesting year to start the year for the Mingus Union Marauders, but we are just beginning our coverage of the 4A Grand Canyon region. We're going to head over to Coconino and Flagstaff when we come back on the other side of this break. Stay with us. Off the Bench, we'll be right back.
Starting in the late 1920s, Grandpa Gettle and his brothers laid the groundwork for what would become a family legacy. Almost 100 years and 100 patents later, Gettle's High Desert Mechanical continues to raise the bar of quality heating, cooling, and plumbing products and services in the Verde Valley.
Call Gettle's High Desert Mechanical Heating, Air Conditioning, and Plumbing at 567-2200 or online at GettlesHDM.com, providing solutions for your comfort. Don't settle. Get Gettles.
Want to welcome you back here to Off the Bench, Northern Arizona Prep Sports, presented by Rice Accounting and Jackson Hewitt Tax Services and Gettle's High Desert Mechanical. On today's show, we are previewing the 4A Grand Canyon region, and I am joined by Nick Yatsenko of KYBC and Matt Showalter of KKLD. Nick and I do the broadcast for the Mingus Union Marauders, and Matt is the voice of the Bradshaw Mountain Bears. Catch us on Friday night, September 3rd. We've got our first couple games of the season. It's going to be a lot of fun. Gentlemen, we talked about Lee Williams. We talked about Mingus Union High School. We even talked a little bit about Mojave. So now we need to move over to the Flagstaff area, where there are two powerhouse schools in Flagstaff and Coconino. They both come into this season with very similar storylines. A couple differences. First and foremost, Flagstaff adds a new head coach, which we will talk about. They also add a new defensive and offensive coordinator, so essentially a new coaching staff for Flagstaff. Coconino, much like Flagstaff, Zach Bennett's gone for the Coconino Panthers. He graduates, big running back for them. Jaramillo, he's gone. Luis Jaramillo, he's gone for Flagstaff. So while they are similar in terms of where they finish in the region, these two teams are very, very good. And with that rambling aside, let's start with Flagstaff. They get a new head coach. Matt, what can you tell us about Sean Manning?
Well, Sean Manning's been around that program for a number of years. He was heavily involved in youth football, also has served on the various coaching staffs for Flagstaff High School over the years for football. So he brings some familiarity. That's going to help. Now, they've had several head coaches, too. They've had 9 in the last 17 years. So don't feel so bad at Mingus, okay? Because we were that way for Bradshaw for a while.
Yeah, yes.
But, no, they really return a very strong core. Offensive linemen, they'll return 3 right there. To me, that's always a key when you look at 4A level. How many offensive linemen are returning?
Yeah.
And that's a key in how they're doing it. Quarterback. Well, Bodie Meyer was a backup last year, but he's very athletic. I think he probably was a little bit more skilled than the starter, but that guy had a little bit more experience the previous year. And then also for them, offensively, they're going to mix it up. They want to get the ball around. Yes, Jaramillo is gone, but they had a backup kid, Marcus Salcido, who could have started for most of the other teams in the Grand Canyon region. And he's a pass catcher. So they're going to get that ball around. They're going to spread around. And 6'8" tight end Nick Morrow, now he's a force on defense, but I think they're going to get the ball to him more as a tight end. So offensively strong. Defensively, they returned about 5 to 6 starters there as well. The defensive line's a key, but I'll tell you, Spencer Smith is a tremendous player, goes from linebacker to defensive end, and they also have Colin Doucette at linebacker. Their 7 returning starters, they may have the best defense, maybe, and that's saying a lot in the Grand Canyon region.
Now, of course, like you mentioned, coming in with a new coach, and also a new quarterback brings a different dynamic to the team. Meyer, in his season last year as a junior, he only had 41 yards passing in 3 attempts, so obviously didn't get a whole lot of opportunities behind their main senior last season. Had 1 passing touchdown. Did have a handful of receiving yards as well, but like you mentioned, Matt, brings a different dynamic to the offense. Same thing like I was talking with Coach O'Boyle with Lee Williams. They've got 2 different quarterbacks. One runs well, one passes well. And it seems like that might be the case with Flagstaff as they come in with a different look in their senior quarterback who, like you said, a little bit more skilled in different areas than their previous QB.
Yeah, and the question for them is going to be how quick can you adjust to the new coaching staff? Even though there's some familiarity, there are still some changes. So that's going to be the key there. Depth of roster is pretty good for them, but for them it's going to be the defense leading the way. And if teams can figure out how can they handle Salcido enough to limit him a bit, the question is, can they protect enough for Mayer to be able to get that ball down the field? Because they also have Ethan Ayup, a wide receiver, to be I think a 2-year starter at least as a senior. And so he's got some talent. So it's just figuring things out. But, yeah, they're a force, I believe, this year.
You got that big target in Morrow, right over the middle. Big senior target. I mean,
with a good defense like that, you bet the offense is struggling at practice going against those guys. So that's going to make them a lot better as an offensive unit, too.
That's right.
Yeah, and like we talked about, Jaramillo's obviously gone for the Flagstaff Eagles. Nick, you and I had an opportunity to see him a little bit. I mean, the kid was an absolute monster.
Yeah, Cicito, him, those guys were running all over the field against us. And, I mean, they're going to be missing him for sure. It's going to be a very interesting matchup, especially with the coaching situation going on at both programs.
Right, but bringing in a new defensive coordinator, new offensive coordinator with their new head coach. Like you said, Matt, it's going to be that adjustment period. Can these kids adjust through this offseason to potentially a new offensive scheme, a new defensive scheme, probably just with a few minor changes, but it'll be interesting for Flagstaff.
Well, Sean Manning, the head coach, says we're going to slim down the playbook in order to eliminate mistakes. Okay, so that's great. That's good because you want to concentrate. But if teams can figure out those one or two plays they run the best and shut it down, what do you got after that? That's going to be the question.
Let's shift over to the team right across the way from Flagstaff High School, the reigning 4A Grand Canyon Region champions, the Coconino Panthers, 8-0 last season. Ran through almost everybody and anybody they could. They do lose a good crop of seniors, one of which being their leading rusher in Zach Bennett. Zach had an incredible career at Coconino High School, along with his counterpart Luis Jaramillo over in Flagstaff. But, I mean, Coconino comes into this season with, like we mentioned, similar question marks regarding the running back situation, who's going to be their guy, but it looks like Coconino might have a little core of running backs that are looking pretty good.
They do. Jacob Klaus is in there, but I really, really like Tyson Falzel, number 44, the fullback. Strong. This will be his second year starting. He pops out on that seam route. If they can just get the ball to him accurately, he'll be able to impact there. But the key for them is, again, how will the new quarterback handle it?
Right.
Enoch Watson, a sophomore, 6'2". They say this almost every year. Hey, we're going to pass the ball more and get away from the Cocoa Bunch as much. Well, they haven't really done it because they can't get a connection consistently in the passing game with what they've had at quarterback in the past. However, they believe that Enoch Watson will be a different story. He's a sophomore. He's good talent. Probably one of the best potential quarterbacks they've had there in a number of years. They're going to have to be able to pass effectively a little bit because I think they will come back to the pack of the Grand Canyon region this year because they lose not only Bennett, but I think the key player for them was Cardoza, that wingback and that linebacker. He was the player of the year in the Grand Canyon region, so I think they'll miss him as much. But that defense is tremendous. I know Flag's got a good one, but they're returning 8 players, Coconino is, to that defense. Andy Ruiz is coming back, a 2-time first-team All-Region. He's a corner. He's also a good receiver. They're strong all the way up the middle, and that's what you look for with a good football defense. Every level has a first-team region guy on it. They are tough, and it's going to be hard to beat them. But the key is, can they block enough for Watson, and will they stick with the pass because they couldn't do it against Cactus? They had opportunity, but they're trying to reach that level, so they're going to have to be able to pass the ball some to get deep in the playoffs.
Well, they're going to have to open up the passing lanes anyway. When you've got a core of running backs and you start to figure out, okay, it's one of these 3 guys. When they're on the field, they're going to be running it. You do want that transition from the run to the pass. And like you said, new quarterback, a good few question marks there with the guy who will be under center for Coconino High School. Like you said, they do return some great defensive players. Again, Nick, you and I got a chance to see Coconino. I mean, where do you feel they're at right now in the region?
I'm just going to touch on, Matt, what you said about Fausel being a fullback. Man, was it fun to watch. I know we were, we're on Mingus side doing the games, but it was fun to watch almost an NFL-style fullback run up the middle, put his helmet down, his shoulders down, and just carry the ball for a couple of yards. That was really neat. And he's going to be dangerous again doing that. And hopefully that opens up the passing lane for Flagstaff a little bit more. That should help with some protection.
Yeah, and exactly. And once they get that running game going, I mean, that'll definitely open up a lot for their offense.
Well, you just get behind big old Xavier Nakai, number 73. A lot watching other teams and film, and even Bradshaw, a lot of Ole tackling or blocking when that guy comes your way. Just let him on by. He is a big key for them as well. But it's just good leadership at the coaching level. They got seniors who are contributing, and they have that French, who's a good wrestler. He's also going to contribute as a running back. But also Pearson Watson is a first-team All-Region player, too, at linebacker. And also, they have Jaramillo returning, a different Jaramillo returning, Jonathan Jaramillo. He was in a bad car accident, so he didn't even play last year, and he's going to be really tough in that linebacker spot. Padilla there as well. So they really are the team still to beat, I think, the Grand Canyon region.
I agree with that as well. And like I mentioned at the end of the show, we will talk about our who we think is going to be the top 2 teams with a dark horse as well at the top of the region. So stick around for that for sure. We take a look at Coconino's schedule. They start off the season very tough against Cactus. Really, really good school. They follow that up with Cactus Shadows, and they've got Marcos Deniza. They then play a very tough 3A Snowflake team who finished 7-1 last year. Really, really good program. Start off at Cactus is a great early test for this offense.
It is. Now, they're also going to catch Cactus at a good time for 2 reasons. One, Cactus would have played a week before against the 2-time state champ, Mesquite, up at the Sky Dome. And then also the second part of it is they have at least two transfers coming in to help that offensive line, but they won't be eligible to week 6. Oh. So a little bit of break there for Bradshaw as well as Coconino. So that's a real, and that's a real good test for them. There's no doubt.
Yeah, so those kids won't get an opportunity to start playing until they meet up with the Mingus Marauders on October 22nd, which will be the perfect time to introduce some more weapons to an already loaded Coconino Panthers team. But like I mentioned, they start the season, like you said, September 10th, the Coconino Panthers take on Cactus Cobras. Didn't get a chance to touch upon Flagstaff's schedule, so let's shift back over to Flagstaff before we go to break. They start off pretty tough as well against Peoria and Washington. Both teams had pretty decent seasons last year. Then they faced the Mingus Marauders in week 3. So how are we feeling about Flagstaff starting off the year?
Well, I think they'll get off to a really good start, again, because their head coach, Sean Manning's been around the program. The kids are familiar with them. And they have a lot of confidence going in this year. They're going to be a little bit different offensively. Hey, but if I had Jaramillo too, I'd be getting that guy the ball a lot.
Yeah.
But no, they're talented, and they're one of the teams that might be a sleeper in the region.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Like I mentioned, I had Lee Williams at the beginning as one of my sleeper teams, and it just feels like it's going to be a close race this year.
There's so many different options, and when you're looking through some of the school articles, you got players who were out last season. These are juniors who are going to be seniors this season, but maybe they didn't play because of COVID restrictions, or so many different outliers that when you're reading through some of these schools' previews, you're like, oh boy, they have some sleeper players that maybe we didn't see last season, or some of the teams couldn't even play a few games. So different circumstances is going to make it.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I mean, who knows how many kids maybe didn't want to play with a mask on last year, or just didn't want to play just for the risk of COVID, which makes sense. People live with elderly people, and people who are susceptible to getting the virus makes complete sense. So yeah, that does bring a different dynamic as well. Transfer students, like you said, Coco's getting 2.
Well, that's 2 to Cactus.
Oh, to
their
Cactus. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So I take back my Mingus comment, because
okay.
it wasn't necessarily.
They may have that too.
And I also have that. Yeah, you're right. You're 100% right. But so Flagstaff and Coconino, I mean, as usual, they're hanging around the top of the region.
They are.
Yeah.
And I think for Coconino, again, the key for them is they got that tougher schedule. They got some younger guys blending in with the varsity there. So the question for them is, hey, will they be able to get that underclassmen talent catching up with where they are as a nucleus? But again, their schedule's real strong this year. They hope to stay away from injuries.
And that's going to be the key for everybody, it seems like, is injuries. I mean, the difference between last year and this year is you got a full off season. We get kids who get an opportunity to go down to Cali camp, get a chance to play 7-on-7s, and we're hoping that this year can look a little bit more normal in terms of the play on the field and limit the injuries. There were a lot of injuries last year. I mean, week 1, Jaramillo went down against Mingus early on. He was a big reason why the Marauders kept that score close. I mean, of course, there were other factors as well, but you can't deny that Jaramillo coming off the field is a bigger loss than he is addition, of course.
He is, and I think for, say, like Flagstaff there, what is their depth at the skill positions?
Right.
And that's going to be the case for Coconino. With you have this group of running backs here, well, I don't think anybody's going to have the impact of Bennett, for example, or Cardoza there. But again, can they get that quarterback play? That's going to be. They need to be versatile, go deeper in the playoffs, and they saw that when they played Coconino, and they know that.
Gentlemen, we've talked about Lee Williams. We've talked about Mingus. We've talked about Coco and Flag. So there's only 2 more schools we need to cover, and that is Prescott and Bradshaw Mountain. So on the other side of this break, we'll head over to Prescott and Bradshaw to talk about the Bears and the Badgers, respectively, right here on Off the Bench. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Two things we can count on every year.
A new set of tax rules and great weather here in northern Arizona.
Jackson Hewitt Tax Service, locally owned and operated by Lewis Rice since 1997, is here for you all year long.
Your neighborhood Jackson Hewitt Tax Office will help you in all of your taxing situations.
Electronic filing is always free with your tax preparation at Jackson Hewitt Tax Service.
Get more in return. Call 1-800-234-1040 for an office near you.
Want to welcome you back here to Off the Bench, Northern Arizona Prep Sports, presented by Gettles, High Desert Mechanical, and Cottonwood Parks and Recreation. We have been previewing the 4A Grand Canyon region as we get set for the start of the 2021 football season on September 3rd. I am joined to my right. You can hear him Friday nights on KYBC and Verde Valley TV with me for the Mingus Union broadcast. It is Nick Hitsinko. And to my left, you can hear him on Friday nights for the Bradshaw Mountain Bears. It is Matt Showalter on KKLD. Matt, we're in your neck of the woods now. But we're going to start with the team across the way from you, and that is the Prescott Badgers. The Badgers last season finishing 4-4, did get an opportunity to go into the play-in round, did not get the win in the play-in round, but that seemed to be an issue for a lot of teams. Very, very strong competition in the playoffs last year. Coco being the only team that made it out of the play-in round last season. But Prescott's returning a good core of players. They're welcoming in a plethora of students who are playing football, which we'll talk about here. But gentlemen, how are we feeling about Prescott? Matt, we'll start with you.
Who would have thought when they started 0-3, they'd finish second in the region and make the playoffs and kill Bradshaw?
Yeah.
So when it comes to Cody Collette, flat out one of the best coaches, I think, high school football here in Arizona. He's done a tremendous job there at Prescott. Now, as far as for this season, the key for them, like a lot of the better teams in the region, they return 4 offensive linemen. And Cody does such a great job with the offensive line there. Now, they're still going to be a run-dominant team. Cody Leopold, he's a junior, tremendous running back. He's the next great Prescott running back. Alex Vaughn, who did not play football ever before until last year at quarterback, will be back there this year. He's a junior, great athlete, and also he's going to probably play some wide receiver. So they're going to mix it up a little bit. But they're pretty much a run-dominant team. They live and die by that. But they, again, on defense, I think it's going to be the key for them. Now, they are probably a mix of experienced and talented underclassmen, but again, like a lot of teams, the key is going to be depth for them. But can they get a real good effort from that defense? I think offensively, they'll be okay. Now, when they play teams, better teams on their schedule, they're going to be challenged if they have to pass the football. But the key is going to be the defense for them. Also, Emmerman's a really good tight end, and also translates on the defense. And Leopold's first team all-region as a linebacker, and that was as a sophomore last year. So that's going to be a key for them. Can they get the effort up front on defense? And can they, again, keep teams from passing the football? Because there'll be a few teams doing it this year.
Yeah, and I think, you talked about it. They started off really slow last season, going 0-3. 31-15 loss to Lee Williams to start the season. They followed that up with a close loss against Apache Junction, 23-20, and then get stomped by Coco, 41-0. And you got to say, I guess it's Cody's secret stuff that was able to get Prescott turned around, because after that, they just started rolling, beating Flagstaff, who was a very, very tough team, beating Mojave, who had a tough year last year. Like you mentioned, Bradshaw, 32-10, a statement win against Bradshaw late in the season, beating Mingus 43-35, and then of course they lost in the playoffs to the eventual, I believe, state champion Cactus, who went to the state championship. But regardless of that, you look at the schedule now; it's not any easier. I mean, they start off the season with Glendale. Glendale was 5-1 last season. Then they get a little bit better of an opponent in the 5A Camelback, who were 4-6 in 2019. Only were able to play one game last season, probably due to COVID. Then they face up against Washington, who was 6-2 last year. You keep going through their schedule. They've got 3A Blue Ridge, who's solid. They were 5-2 last year. Coconino, of course, is in the region, 8-0. Mesquite, 6-1. And then it gets a little bit better, but really it doesn't, because they've got a retooled Flagstaff team later in the season. Then they go over to take on Bradshaw Mountain, who have also retooled, which we'll talk about them in a little bit. And they finish off with Mingus, who's, we talked about some of the struggles the Marauders have, but this seems to me like Coach Collette is building a team. Strength of schedule seems very, very prominent in this, that the Prescott Badgers not only want to win the region, but they want to make a strong push into the playoffs.
Well, that's strategy when you go about building a schedule now. It's year to year. It's not 2 years now. It's a year-to-year schedule.
Right.
On one hand, even if the better teams you play, you get half of the power points. If you beat them, you get the whole entire PowerPoint system on that. But I don't know, now with the Grand Canyon region so balanced, there's going to be several losses in there, more so in the past. So another thing, they have the numbers, but there's a lot of hard-hitting football teams. I just question, what are they going to be like at the end of the year when they're going to need a win or two? So their schedule might be almost a little too tough.
But you want to talk about depth. I mean, they've definitely got it. I mean, you told us off air that they've welcomed in over 100 new kids into their program. I mean, of course, I guess that doesn't necessarily mean that skill level, they're going to be varsity ready when they step in as freshmen. But that's great for the program going forward, and that provides a little bit more depth.
Yeah, well, from freshman to varsity, all through senior class, they have a total of about 100. And that is great because they're now one of the smaller schools in Grand Canyon region. But here again, when you're playing such a tough schedule, you want somebody, well, Nick, you played for Mingus. It's good to have a few teams you could beat pretty easy, right? Because you can get some of these younger guys some time. But in the case of Prescott, if you're playing these tough teams every week, where's those young guys going to develop?
Yeah, and boy, my junior, senior season, we only played tough teams, it seems like that. We played Greenway, Sandra Day O'Connor, who was formidable at that time. I ended up playing Notre Dame in the playoffs. So we've had pretty tough schedules. I would say some of the teams in our region were our easier games, and that's not the case anymore. The teams in our region, Flagstaff's much better than when I was at Mingus. Coconino's significantly better. They've become a dynasty in the last decade. So all these teams, Bradshaw, again, elevated. Prescott seems to be even better. So these teams that were in the region weren't playing quite as well back when I was at Marauder. Those were our wins, where now they're tougher to come by because you're looking at the schedule. And thank goodness for 4A. So out of 6A, 5A, 4A, 3A, 2A, there's 7 regions in all of those divisions, except 4A, there's 9. So that's another 8 or 9 teams that you kind of get to go through when you're doing your schedule. But yeah, the strength of schedule is key too.
Nick, we talked about the schedule you've gone through as a player. You had to deal with Coach Bob Young in a positive way, of course, because Coach Young has a great reputation throughout the 4A and in the entire state of Arizona. However, that does poorly transition into Bradshaw Mountain, who is currently Bob Young's football team. And as I mentioned, you can listen to Matt Showalter on KKLD. He will be broadcasting the Bradshaw Mountain football games. They start on the road at Seton Catholic Prep. So Matt, let's talk about those Bradshaw Mountain Bears. Last season, 3-4, transition year with Bob Young from Coach Moeller. Of course, tragically passes away last year. But Coach Young steps in. They've got a full year with Bob Young. How are the Bears looking?
Well, Bradshaw Bob and the Bears should be better this year. You're right. He'd been able to be in his weight training program. That's his bread and butter. That's what he's talked about. His success at Mingus was that. Nick, you've been there, done that with that, and it's not easy. But if you commit yourself to it, you will get stronger. The team will get stronger. So they've had a good core buy into that. All the main talent of the Bradshaw Mountain Bears is returning, and they're stronger, they're bigger. When they hit the field this year, teams are going to see a difference in their size. Also, power football is the way they're going to be. Bob's going to go back to the wing T. But sometimes the wing T gets a bad rap, but today it's the new old offense, okay? So a lot of teams don't see it because they see the spread. So that's going to be hard for some teams on the schedule to be able to defense the Bears. But Bob's wing T is versatile. They will go in the shotgun, they will spread it out, and so that there'll be more smash mouth football. They return 5 offensive linemen, led by Michael Kelly. He'll be on his third, he's 2-time first team All-Region. He's now a senior. Big James Giggy, he started as a freshman. He's about 6'4", runs about 220. He was going to play tight end, but due to some depth issues, he's going to have to play right tackle. So the Bradshaw Bears return that offensive line. They'll be really good. Quarterback Grady Rose is going to be one of the better quarterbacks in the region. By next year, maybe one of the better ones in the state. And also, you have running back now. They'll be able to, teams won't focus on that spread like they had been. And so Bradshaw Mountain have different backs that rotate in. And so they're going to be able to bring that this year. The tight end position, they will throw there. Malachi Stevenson is going to be one of the top tight ends in northern Arizona this year. He can also play running back. He can slot out over there as well. So they're going to be very versatile. Reuben Solano, a junior. The skills are in the junior class for Bradshaw. Linemen, seniors. Defensively, Bradshaw still run that 3-5 stack. They may try to morph into a forefront from time to time, but depth issues on the line there has probably caused them to stay with that 3-man front. But Bradshaw has Neil Dixon, who used to be the longtime defensive coordinator for Mingus. He was helping out last year. This year, he is the defensive coordinator. That's going to show. They're going to be more aggressive. They've simplified the defense, and you're going to see a more aggressive Bradshaw defense.
Absolutely terrifying. A maintained and calmed down Bears team is quite scary for the 4A Grand Canyon region. Nick, you had an opportunity to play under Coach Bob Young. We talk a little bit about your experience, just what Coach Young brings when you guys get an opportunity to go through a full off season with him.
Yeah, and first, to hear Bradshaw is going to be even more smash mouth football, that's tough. That's tough because they are smash mouth as it is, and you're right, man. Coach Young, he brings dynasty. I mean, I remember showing up at his camps my freshman year, first starting, and as a player, as soon as you step in that weight room or on that field, he demands respect. And so does his coaching staff, and they respect you the same. But you just understand that you're a part of something bigger. Something big, and that's what he preaches right from the beginning. Is he's not looking to have a couple good seasons at Bradshaw. He's looking to make a dynasty. And it starts here, starts with this group right here, and he gets all the guys behind him. And that's really key, and I feel like he's going to do a great job of that over Bradshaw this year.
Yeah, and we talked about Coach Mueller put together a pretty solid program over at Bradshaw Mountain, and I've always said this, it feels like you've gone from Vince Lombardi to Bill Belichick. You go from one good coach to the other. Mm-hmm. Of course, Bob brings a different dynamic. He potentially brings in a different offense and defense. He brings in Coach Dixon. I mean, it's interesting to see Bradshaw continue to grow at the level they are, and Prescott, another school that we talked about, that area, it's just growing more and more, and they're getting a lot of talented kids there. Josh Grant, senior last year, graduates, great quarterback, finished with over 1,100 yards last season. You tell me Grady Rhodes is going to be better than him? Josh Grant was already very good. I mean, the returners are getting, the fact that they're going to get a full season with Neil Dixon as opposed to him just, helping out with the defense here and there and then leaving, but he's going to be there. He's going to be on the sidelines more involved than he was last season, I should say, because you would know more about his involvement than I would. But I mean, man, Bradshaw is and I don't want to spoil it too much because when we do get to our next segment, we'll talk about our top two. But I feel like Bradshaw, Coco right now have to be the teams to beat in this region.
Well, Bradshaw's depth is not as big as they would like it to be right now, but Bob is still developing his program, the core, the commitment. Mm-hmm. But they still have a pretty good roster size, but the depth issue could be something possibly there. Talk about transfers. Jace Bersinio from Mingus. He is going to be a big help to Bradshaw Mountain. However many games he's going to be allowed to play under that transfer rule. He'll be keyed as an inside linebacker. He started as a linebacker for Robert Ortiz back in his sophomore year. And then also he'll be used some at that fullback spot. Gabriel Ricka, a sophomore. This kid's about 6 foot. He's about 220. He's a man body already. He's going to pound it for Bradshaw Mountain. But when teams key in, they're going to hit that long pass there to Makai Pettinta, who last year as a sophomore, his first 6 catches were touchdowns. That kid's something else. He is. And they're bigger on corners. And here's a kid to look out for, Joel Dean, number 21. He's a junior. He's a great corner. He can run all day long. And Bob's versatility of his players will be key for them this year. I could get excited, go all into how their freshmen are. That youth program is really getting strong.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask a little bit as well, as we've had some conversations just off air about, of course, building up your JV program, building up your potential youth program. I know they've got the Prescott Valley Hitmen there. They've got the Chino Valley Cougars, just talking more about the youth football opportunities. But more directly, of course, Coach Young, I mean, there was a very strong youth involvement for football here in the Verde Valley area when Coach Young was here, when he was coaching Mingus, that I've heard about, and now it seems like he's bringing that to Bradshaw. So it just seems like if you're a Mingus fan, it just gets worse and worse the more you hear about it. But I mean, realistically, when you see a program like this that started with tragedy and is now going in such a great direction, it should breed a little more optimism and make you feel good that like we said, Mingus has been struggling, but there's a possibility that they could see this as well and see this similar growth. Prescott's growing very big. Bradshaw's growing as well. So it's nice to see that that Coach Young is continuing to grow that program, and hopefully it'll spread a little bit more.
Well, he is. And you know what? Bradshaw is probably going to be without one of their best players, who is at this point chosen not to play this year. Great kid and all, great talent. But I hope he changes his mind before the season gets started. But in that youth program, they have 2 Mighty Mites, 2 minor teams for the Hitmen, 1 majors, 120 kids in it. Bob has already went to watch, some of their practice and a scrimmage game they had, and he and I met with the youth coaches, so he sees the importance of developing that. And also, as you know, Nick, because you played there, it's having good relationships and experience with the players because they have brothers who are coming up in it. So if you're hearing positive things when they come home, you're more apt to want to play.
Yeah, you're more accountable with all your teammates, and you're trying harder because you know that you're just doing it for a bigger purpose. You're not being selfish out there. It's like the bar that's set right from the beginning of the season is what you follow all season, which is just being loyal and working hard.
Yeah, and I like Bob because he's broadcast friendly.
Yes, yeah, we're big fans of Bradshaw Bob. He's always great, a good big fan of the show, and yes, we're a big fan of Bob Young. But let's take a look at their schedule real quick. They start off, like we mentioned, on the road at Seton Catholic Prep. They took a step back last season, 1-6. Estrella Foothills 4-4, and then much like Coco, they've got an opponent in Cactus.
Ouch, yeah. Look, Cactus, I think, is going to win. If they're not yet Open 8, they're going to win the 4A, in my opinion. And Bradshaw's schedule, I think, is a good schedule for them because you can't look at that and say, well, okay, Yonkers, not that strong. Estrella Foothills, who knows? I mean, they lost, like all their skilled players. Their head coach went to a different school to become the head coach, but they returned 4 linemen there. Donnelly's a great stopper on defensive line. So Bradshaw's schedule is a good one. It's tough because they play on the road 3 of the first 4 weeks. Mm-hmm. But then again, on that back half of the season, they're going to be at home a lot. And also, one of those will be at Prescott, so they might as well say that's a home game.
Right.
But another key is they get their open date is the last regular season week of the season. So get healthy for the playoffs.
A lot of things are trending upward for Bradshaw, it seems like. Like I said, Nick, I mean, you've had an opportunity to play under Coach Young. I mean, he brings just a different feel, a different dynamic to a football field, along with Neil Dixon. I mean, Bradshaw is looking good.
And looking to execute perfectly. That's what Bob Young's going to bring to that Bradshaw program. And after a few games of getting those reps and learning any new plays that they put in with that wing tee, they'll be dangerous. Now, we're talking about the schedule. When you get to games like maybe Bradshaw Mingus or especially Bradshaw Prescott, you can throw all the stats out the window pretty much for those games because those are up in the air.
Yeah, like the homecoming this year for Bradshaw is against Mingus on October the 1st.
Oh, it's going to be a fun one. And it's going to be on the road at Bradshaw. Again, you can catch that on October 1st on KYBC or Verde Valley TV or KKLD if you happen. But we're a little ways away from there. So, gentlemen, we've covered everybody. I think we've done a good job so far. We talked about Lee Williams, Mingus, Coco, Flag, Prescott, Bradshaw. Talked even a little Mojave, who aren't even in the 4A Grand Canyon region anymore. Again, want to wish them the best of luck in the 3A. But now it is time for predictions. However, we do have to take a quick break. So when we come back, we will continue our conversation here about the 4A Grand Canyon region and get you our predictions to see who, at the end of this, is going to be the top 2 teams and possibly who might be a dark horse this year for football. Football season's right around the corner, and our final segment is as well. Stay with us here on Off the Bench.
Starting in the late 1920s, Grandpa Gettle and his brothers laid the groundwork for what would become a family legacy. Almost 100 years and 100 patents later, Gettle's High Desert Mechanical continues to raise the bar of quality heating, cooling, and plumbing products and services in the Verde Valley.
Call Gettle's High Desert Mechanical Heating, Air Conditioning, and Plumbing at 567-2200 or online at GettlesHDM.com, providing solutions for your comfort. Don't settle. Get Gettles.
2 things we can count on every year:
a new set of tax rules and great weather here in northern Arizona.
Jackson Hewitt Tax Service, locally owned and operated by Lewis Rice since 1997, is here for you all year long.
Your neighborhood Jackson Hewitt Tax Office will help you in all of your taxing situations.
Electronic filing is always free with your tax preparation at Jackson Hewitt Tax Service.
Get more in return. Call 1-800-234-1040 for an office near you.
Want to welcome you back here to Off the Bench, Northern Arizona Prep Sports, presented by Cottonwood Parks and Recreation and Gettles High Desert Mechanical. We have been previewing the 4A Grand Canyon region, getting you fired up for the 2021 football season for the 4A Grand Canyon region. I am joined, of course, by Nick Yatsenko, who joins me for the Mingus Union broadcasts on KYBC. And to my left, he is the voice of the Bradshaw Mountain Bears. You can hear him on KKLD on Friday nights, Matt Showalter. Like I talked about, we talked a little bit about each team, who they're coming back, what their schedules are looking like, how we're feeling about the teams in general. But now it is time to discuss who is going to be at the top of the end of it and who apparently is going to be meeting up with Cactus in the championship potentially, because Cactus is a very, very good school. But gentlemen, I want to know, Nick, we'll start with you. Who do you think is going to finish out at the top? Who's the top two? Who's your dark horse?
Boy, I'm coming from Mingus. I'm going to say Bradshaw looks to be my top prospect, especially with Bob Young over there. Yep. That program's already had him for a season. They're going to be tip-top shape, especially execution-wise. And for the dark horse, I'm going to go with my very own Mingus Marauders. Nice. We got some seniors come back. Zach Harrison, Islas. Harrison's going to be huge for the Marauders this season. Can't wait to call these games. And starting the season with a few easy game schedules, maybe. Arcadia, Thunderbird, they didn't have great seasons last season. That might give the Marauders some momentum going into region play, which is exactly what we would need.
I agree. I think Mingus does bring in a lot of interesting storylines to this year, which we'll talk about throughout the season. Of course, a new head coach, coaches by committee, bringing in Zach Harrison. But I do agree they do have some reassurance with Anthony Itzlis coming back. Angelo Alvarez, like we talked about. It does kind of hurt that Jace Presenia's now in Bradshaw, middle linebacker, kind of provides a small hole in the in the defense, and I feel like we were calling Jace's name a lot last season. But I think the schedule definitely puts Mingus in an interesting position. Matt, I'm curious, where are you at with your top two, and who's your dark horse?
Well, first of all, way to come strong, Nick.
Yeah, right.
For Mingus, buddy. All right. So I'll go Coconino first. I think all those starters that are returning, the defense is just phenomenal. And if they can just figure out how to at least keep people honest throwing the football, then they'll go deeper in the playoffs. Second, I'll go with Bradshaw Mountain because, again, they have a very versatile offense. They're changing to the wing tee. And if they can get really good play from the defense and have a couple of guys depth-wise to help them out, they could possibly overtake Coconino. But my dark horse is Lee Williams. Lee Williams returns 4 offensive linemen and Devin Santos at quarterback. If they can find underclassmen to come together, contribute a skill position, and get strong in the weight room, have good conditioning, a little bit of depth, they can do something special. I was tempted to throw Prescott and Flag in there. Boy, this is the toughest year for me to predict. But Flag and Prescott also up in that top tier as well.
Right now, I have Bradshaw at 1, but it's a tentative one. I think Bradshaw and Coco right now, from what we've been talking about, the stuff that I was looking at before we got started, it seems like it's going to be those two battling it out. I mean, we talk about the returners for Coconino. They're returning a strong core even without Zach Bennett. Bradshaw Mountain, they're returning a strong core as well even without Josh Grant, their top quarterback. They come in with potentially an even better quarterback in Grady Rose. I can't deny how good these two teams are, and you get a full year with Bradshaw Bob and Coach Dixon. That brings a completely different dynamic. Nick, you've played with Coach Young. You know what he brings to the table. Matt, you've seen Coach Young coach at Mingus and now at Bradshaw for several years now, so you know what Coach Young brings to the table. Same thing with Coach Dixon. I think Bradshaw right now is at the top, with Coconino nipping very, very close at their heels. And I would say the dark horse, I actually am going to put Prescott in as the dark horse. I think they've got a good, solid core of returners back. Leopold's a solid running back. He provides a lot also on defense. I also agree Coach Collette has got a great core of kids who have really bought into what he provides to them. Whenever I talk to him, he's always got great things to say about the kids. He's also the wrestling coach, so he's got an opportunity to cross-recruit a little bit there. So there's a lot about this Prescott team that's really good. I also really like Lee Williams. They were my initial dark horse. I also think Flagstaff, another school who could be right in the mix at the end. Mingus, kick myself a little bit not putting Mingus in as a dark horse or even as the number 2, because realistically, I do agree they have a very somewhat favorable schedule that could allow them, if they win all of their Freedom games, maybe sneak a couple wins against some of these region teams. But the region is where Mingus is just going to be pushed out, and it's tough when you look at it on paper and you see the guys coming back for Coco, you see the new additions to Flagstaff, the anticipation with Bradshaw, Prescott. I mean, I look at Mingus, it feels to me like Mingus is going to be outside looking in, but who knows? They always play Prescott tough. They played Bradshaw very tough last season. They had a 7-0 loss to Flagstaff to start off the season. They were winning at halftime against River Valley. They beat Mojave handedly in their second game, but if they beat Flagstaff and they beat Mojave, how it goes, and they beat River Valley, which was a last-second fill-in game, that's 3-0 for Mingus. And we're looking at the Marauders like, okay, hang on a second. And of course, I'm talking in the context of last season. But this year, very similar again. Winnable games for this team. And as much as I want to put them in, I just don't feel like, if you look within the region, there's not too much leeway there for them to slide in.
It's a mentality thing, too.
I agree.
And it depends on where these teams are at mentality-wise. Bradshaw is going to be tip-top shape. Prescott with their coach and Cody's going to be the same. These guys will be ready to go. And that's why I put Mingus as a dark horse, is if that spotlight's on the seniors. With coaching staff questionable, and we're right at the season right now, that spotlight's all on those seniors. So like you said, if we can get some momentum in the first few games, you never know. Those seniors might spark it up, and all of a sudden your team's behind you 100%, and you're starting to play well going into region, which is what's going to happen if they want any chance.
Yeah, and the roster depth is the issue for Mingus. That's the big issue. Real quick, say something about Mojave. I love Rudy Olvera, the head coach there. They're down to 3A. They got talent. Williams was a freshman last year, outstanding. I think they'll make an effect down at 3A. I'm amazed how Rudy can get players to continue to turn out for that team with a good attitude and spirit, stay on that roster without hardly winning the last few years. But they're going back to that running game, just like Bradshaw Mountain. That's where they're familiar. So I think for someone like Mojave's moved down, you got teams like Mingus who now don't have, like Bradshaw, that extra game where you can kind of beat up on Mojave a bit. So Mingus, you're right, the comps is beginning, but can they get that roster up? If they can, then I tell you, the Grand Canyon region, everybody's competitive.
And very much so. And Matt, you touched upon it. I talked about it at the top of the show. It seems like this year is going to be the closest it's been in a very long time. Despite Mingus's flaws, like I said, there are winnable games on the schedule. Anybody could beat anybody at any point. We saw it. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be a very interesting year.
And we may see Snowflake next year because they may be putting 4A.
Yeah, and that could be really interesting as well, to add Snowflake High School into the 4A to sort of obviously replace Mingus Union. So there's a lot to still be decided, and it all starts week 1. Most schools are going to be starting September 3rd. Coconino's first game is September 10th, at home against Cactus. Guys, we're getting close. We've been waiting for this all year. I had this date circled on my calendar that we could talk about this preview show. And Matt, thank you very much for coming on the show. Best of luck to Bradshaw this season. Can't wait to touch bases later on in the year and see how they're doing. Nick, we're stuck together, man. We're going to have to go to the games.
Can't wait.
It's going to be a lot of fun.
Can't
and
wait.
We cannot wait for you to join us as well for football season. It kicks off September 3rd, and you can listen to the Bradshaw Mountain Bear games on KKLD every Friday night with this gentleman right here, Matt Showalter. And you can listen to Nick and I on KYBC and Verde Valley TV for the Mingus Union broadcasts. Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming on the show. I'd like to thank you all for watching and listening at home. I am your host, Philip Katafamo, wishing you a great rest of your week, and we'll see you again next time.